Yes.
All right, the state's going to call Naija Sams.
Hi, ma'am. Do you raise your right hand, please? You can. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Go ahead and have a seat in the witness chair. And then I'll just ask that you keep your voice up and speak into the microphone, okay? And that's movable, so you can pull it down a little bit and get it. There you go.
Ma'am, can you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Naija Marie Sams, and it's S-A-M-S.
Wrong map. Ma'am, tell us what city you currently live
I live in Canton now.
in. You live in Canton?
Yes.
Okay. And you got to speak into this microphone here, and it is on.
It's just
Okay.
directional, so you have to speak directly into it.
I'd like to draw your attention to January of 2017. Can you tell the jury where it is that you lived at that time?
723 Russell Avenue.
Okay. And I'm going to point your attention to this map. Do you see that map there next to you?
Yes, I do.
I think it's marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit number 13. We verify that. Yes, State's Exhibit number 13. Do you recognize this map, this neighborhood here?
Yes.
Tell the jury what this shows.
It shows where I lived and where my truck was set on fire in the parking lot, or in the driveway there.
Okay. All right. Now, do you see that little pen-looking like thing here? Right here?
Yes.
All right. So if you press this button here, you see a green dot that comes up? All right. I'm going to have you hold that. Now, can you please point using that pointer where you're referring to where you lived? Okay. And what was your address there?
723 Russell Avenue.
And you said that's where your truck was set on fire?
My truck was set on fire right there.
And what is that you're pointing to there on State's Exhibit 13?
That's the driveway.
That's the driveway. Your residence there at 723 Russell Avenue, that's located in what city, county, and state?
Akron, Ohio. Summit County.
Okay. And you live in Canton now, right?
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to point at it right now. If I have to ask you again, you can pick that back up. Now, when you lived there, when did you move from there?
We moved from Russell in 2017. I want to say it was probably April or May that we moved from there.
Of 2017?
Yes.
Okay. And when you lived there at 723 Russell, who did you live there with?
My husband, Anthony Sams.
Okay. Did you have any children?
Yes.
And did they live there with you?
Yes.
How many children do you have, ma'am?
Right now, I have 5 kids altogether.
Okay. All right. And they all live with you there at 723 Russell?
No, at the time, I was pregnant with one of them, and 3 of them lived there with me.
All right. Now, Ms. Sams, I'd like to draw your attention to January 23rd of 2017. Do you recall that date?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury why it is that you recall that night specifically?
I woke up in the middle of the night. It was around 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. The neighbors upstairs were screaming my truck was on fire. And I come running outside and my truck was on fire.
Okay. So the neighbors woke you up.
Mm-hmm.
Did your other family members also wake up?
My kids know, the kids didn't.
Okay. And you said you woke up and you went out to the driveway and your truck was on fire?
Yes.
You had what type of truck?
It was a Dodge Durango.
Did you call 911 at that point?
No, the fire department was already there.
Fire department was already there. All right, I'm going to show you some photographs that are a part of an exhibit, State's Exhibit 105, okay? Yes, this is on the flash drive.
So that video next to you, the It's on the swivel arm, so you can swivel that towards you so you can see it. There you go.
Ms. Sams, do you see that residence there on State's Exhibit 105? I believe it's labeled Slide D.
Yes,
Tell the jury what this residence is, whose residence that is.
that's where I lived.
At 723 Russell?
Yes,
Okay. What about this slide here, Slide E?
that's still where we lived.
Side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what about right here in Slide F? Can you tell us about that?
That's the driveway, and that's my Durango sitting in the driveway.
Okay. Can you see my cursor here?
Yes,
Is that there where you your
Yes.
Durango is?
Yeah.
All right. Can you tell us about Slide G? What do you see there?
that is my Durango.
Okay.
It looks as though the hood is up.
The hood is up. All right.
Maybe.
All right. How about Slide H of State's Exhibit 105? Can you tell the jury what you see there?
That's my Durango after it was set on fire.
Okay. So is it set on fire in the back area?
There was a wash rag stuck in the gas tank.
Now, when you got out there, what did you first thing you saw when you came outside?
The truck was on fire. Like, the fire department was busting out the driver's side window to be able to get the truck open.
Okay. And so were the doors open or closed at that point?
They were closed.
They were closed. So in this photo, we see the doors open. They later were opened.
Yeah, you can see, actually, in the photo, you can see that the window, the driver's side window is broken.
Okay.
Where that's the fire department had broke it to get into it.
All right. Slide I, can you tell us about this photo?
Yep, that's inside the truck, and that's the gas, where the gas can, or the gas tank, there was a wash rag, like I said, stuck in the gas tank, and that's the result of the fire.
Okay. And this is your truck.
Yes.
And I believe this is what you're referring to as the window.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes.
And did you say you saw the fire department break that window?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, did the fire department tell you how the vehicle was set on fire?
No, they did not.
Okay. But you saw this wash rag in the back of the truck?
Yes, I did.
Did you talk to someone from the fire department at that point in time?
Yes. Yes.
Did you know did you know how the truck was set on fire at that point on that night?
No, but I had an idea.
Okay. And what was the idea that you had?
That because my son had had some issues, and I knew that prior to, there was another house set on fire up the street, and my son had had some issues with the neighbor, and he kind of let me know that he was not playing, and so I kind of assumed that it was him.
Okay. And did you have any idea that did you know for sure at that point, or did you have other potential people that may have did this to you?
I didn't have any enemies. I didn't anybody else that I would have thought would have done that.
Okay. Now you said that you said you can move the screen back a little bit, ma'am. Thank you. You can if you push the arm there. All right. You indicated that your son had some issues with a neighbor. Is that right?
Yes.
And what was your son's name?
Devontae Ware.
Okay. And how did you become aware of these issues?
The neighbor came to my door, letting me know that my son was walking through his yard, and he was upset about it. It wasn't his yard. I believe it was his mother's yard, and he was upset about it, and he just wanted my son to stop doing it.
Okay. He was upset about it? Mm-hmm. How do you know that neighbor was upset about it?
He was yelling. Him and my son had verbal confrontations a couple times, and me and my husband actually heard him and my son arguing at one point, where the neighbor, he was telling my son that he would body him.
He would what?
That he would body him.
Okay. And you observed this
Yes.
argument?
Yes, I heard it.
Using that pointer there, where did that argument occur?
Right there on the corner here. Let's see. Right here on the corner.
All right.
For the record, what's she pointing at?
I'm sorry.
State's Exhibit number 13,
Corner
Judge.
of what and what?
Corner of Russell Avenue and Hillcrest.
Okay, thank you.
And that's where you saw this argument between the neighbor and your son, who said, I will body him.
Yes.
I'll body you? Is that?
Yes. Yes.
And Do you see that neighbor in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Can you please point to him? Describe what he's wearing for the record, please.
That man right there, he's wearing gray pants and a white and gray striped shirt.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant in this
Right,
case.
well, somebody's like,
Ms. Sams, can you tell the jury when it was you saw this argument in relation to January 23rd of 2017?
I would say maybe it was 2 days prior to that. I actually had a conversation after the argument. I spoke with him myself.
Okay.
I went and I kind of, if you don't mind, can I share?
Sure, you can use the pointer.
We had a discussion. We were standing about right there.
Is this before or after the fire?
This is before the fire.
Was this before or after the argument you observed with your son?
After.
After, okay. When you had this conversation with him, can you tell the jury what his demeanor was?
He was upset.
He was
Very
upset.
upset, yes.
Okay. At some point, did you speak with Detective Looney from the Akron Police Department?
I contacted the police department after I had found out that Mr. Ford had been arrested. I contacted the police department and let them know that I thought that that my truck being set on fire was in relation to the house fires.
Okay. Ms. Sams, initially, though, when you spoke with Detective Roblewski from the Akron Fire Department, did you did you tell him who you thought it could be?
I don't believe I did.
Okay.
I don't necessarily remember, but I don't believe I did.
I don't have any other questions, Judge. Thank you.
Mr. Riley.
Ms. Sams, my name is Scott Riley, along with Joe Gorman. We represent Stanley Ford. All right. I ask you some very simple questions. If you don't understand them, let me know. I'll try to rephrase. Okay. And just so we're clear, the fire on the car was January 23rd of 2017, correct?
Yes.
And I believe the reports say that the fire department arrived on scene somewhere around 2:30 in the morning. That's
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
And you were there when the fire department was putting out the fire, correct?
Right.
And at some point in time, within a half hour of the fire department getting there, an arson investigator arrived, correct?
Right.
And you spoke to that arson investigator, correct? Yes?
You have to answer
Yes.
yes or no.
Sorry, yes.
That's okay.
The arson investigator asked you who you thought would do this. Do you have any enemies? Do you recall that?
Vaguely.
Vaguely. You told him no,
Right.
correct?
Right.
So on January 23rd, 2017, within hours of the vehicle being put out, you told the Akron Fire Department that you didn't know who could have done this.
At that moment, I didn't, because like I said, I was woke up out of my sleep. So never did I think that the argument between my son and Mr. Ford, that it would get to that extreme. But I did see him standing outside. That same night when the fire happened, he was standing outside. I can show you on the, if.
Well, no, let's just answer the question, okay? The question was, you didn't tell
Right.
the fire department about Mr. Ford, correct?
Right.
You just had an argument with him 2 days before, correct?
My son did, yes.
You said you were there, you saw it.
I heard it. Yes.
You said you walked down and talked to him.
Yes.
You said he came to your front porch.
Yes.
All about your son and the defendant, Mr.
Right.
Ford, correct?
Yes.
So within 48 hours of these three interactions, which you called arguments, where he said he would body him, you told the fire investigators that you had no known enemies, correct?
Right. I didn't have any enemies.
And you said you think of no one that would dislike you enough to want to burn the vehicle, correct?
That could be what I said. Like I said, it was 4 years ago. I'm not exactly sure what.
You also told Mr. Wroblewski from the fire department that you were going to talk to your neighbors in the morning. Do you recall telling them that?
Yes.
And that you were going to get back to him with any additional information,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And you did not call him back the next day, did you?
Maybe not the next day, but I did call him back.
You didn't call anybody about the information you're now telling us about Mr. Ford until May 31st of 2017. Isn't that correct?
No, I don't think that's good.
You called Detective Looney on May 31st, 2017 and spoke to him on the phone, didn't you?
I did speak to someone on the phone, but I don't think it was that far in between. Like, that doesn't really make sense that it was that long ago.
Do you know how long it was?
It was around, no, I don't know exactly.
Is it safe to say it wasn't until you saw the news that showed that Mr. Ford was in trouble that you then made the phone call and for the first time told somebody about this incident between you, your son, and Mr. Ford?
I don't think it was necessarily that he had been arrested, but I remember seeing the detectives in that area, and so that's when I contacted someone.
And when you say the detectives in the area,
They were investigating the fire, the house fire, the second house fire.
all right, the one at 693 Fultz.
Yes.
And if I told you that occurred in May of 2017, would that refresh your recollection as to when you saw the detectives and you first made those comments?
Possibly. Like I said, it's been a long time. I'm not necessarily 100% sure on when I contacted someone.
Ms. Ware, Ms. Sams, excuse me. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Mr. D'Angelo?
Ms. Sams, you indicated that on the night of the fire you saw the defendant.
Yes, I did.
And where did you see him?
He was standing about right here
Describe where you're pointing.
in a driveway. It's actually the first driveway past my driveway on Hillcrest.
And that's you're referring to Stacy Exhibit 13?
Yes.
Okay. And, ma'am, you indicated on cross-examination that you didn't think anyone would set your car on fire over an argument.
Right.
So you didn't think it was the defendant based on the argument that you had solved?
Not in the very beginning, no, I did not. When
Then
I
after-
seen him standing outside, I don't know, it crossed my mind, but I didn't really think that it was him. No, I did not.
And then when you saw he was being investigated for the fire at 693 Fultz, you were starting to put two and two
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Sustained as to the form of the question.
I don't have any, oh, hold on one second. At the time of this incident, what was your name?
Naija Ware?
Naija Ware, now it's Naija Sams.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sams. You may step down. I know Law and Crime is next, but that's probably over 45 minutes, I think, right?
No. I don't think we have time.
Yeah, you can. Thank you very much, sir. I guess my question to the defense is, because Ms. Jordan's already testified.
I'm sorry.
I said, I guess my question to the defense is, since Ms. Jordan has already testified regarding her qualifications, are you prepared to stipulate that she's previously testified in those?
We would consider this a continuing testimony. They don't have to go through and re-qualify her.
We don't think she's going to be that long.
Okay, well, we'll start. So call your next witness.
We're going to call Molly and Jordan.
And there's new microphone covers. I don't know if you saw them. Okay. I missed it. The board was in my way. Welcome back. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead and have a seat. I'll remind you, even though I just swore you in, this is continuing testimony from your testimony last week. Mr. LaQuincy, you may begin.
I was just Judge. I was thinking she was going to go out for lunch, but. Is this which one? No, I have that.
Before you start, Mr. D'Angelo, how many slides are on 105?
A through J? Is that all?
There's going to be more, Judge. The next witness will testify.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Welcome back, Ms. Jordan. Just for the record, if you would just tell us your full name and spell your last name.
Molly Jordan, Jordan.
Hold that microphone closer to you. Thank you.
And Ms. Jordan, I think we have an agreement with the defense that basically we don't need to go through your background qualifications and training as we did the first time you testified in this case.
Okay.
All right? So basically, at this point in time, we want to talk about a separate situation in which you became involved in doing some testing. You had mentioned the first time you had testified that not only do you do accelerant type testing, but you do other types of testing such as fingerprint testing.
Say that again. I didn't hear
Yeah,
that.
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
I was going to remind you.
I've been sitting down all day and I forgot. When you previously testified, you talked about the different duties you have and things that you do. And besides or in addition to accelerant type testing, you also do fingerprint type testing.
Yes.
All right. And so for the jury, just specifically just for the fingerprint type testing, what kind of training do you have in order to do that?
So training for that was 6 months in-house at our laboratory from the man who basically built up that latent print division. And then I was competency tested in a blind test to make sure that I could do it on my own. And then after that, I received outside agency training from OPATA, which is Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy. They actually have classes that teach you how to process items for latent prints, what kind of latent prints you're looking for, what the best processing methods are, and how to preserve them.
All right. And so you have been, I guess, deemed to be an expert in the determination of fingerprint comparisons. Is that fair?
We don't do comparisons. I do processing. So I
All
will
right.
process for latent prints, and then I will preserve it with a tape lift or a photograph, and then that will get sent on to another agency, usually BCI.
All right. And BCI would be the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, correct?
Correct.
And that's under the Attorney General of the state of Ohio.
Correct.
All right. So your job is not to compare prints. You just collect them from items, preserve them so that somebody else can examine them and make that comparison.
Correct.
All right. So directing your attention specifically to an incident that took place on January 23rd of 2017, did you have an opportunity to, or were you requested to examine an item in order to determine if there was any fingerprints on that item?
Yes.
All right. Now, in the terminology used, latent print, correct?
Yes.
Could you just tell us briefly what a latent print is?
Yeah, a latent print is something that you can't see with your naked eye. It's something that has to be processed in order to bring it out so that we can see it.
All right. And when you do that, how do you bring it out?
So When I receive evidence in, it goes under two different categories. We have a non-porous category, which means it's not going to absorb water, and then we have a porous category, which is like paper, porous items that will absorb water. So the item in this case was a non-porous item. So for those types of items, I typically will do a visual examination of the item. I will jot down in my notes what I see, and then I will process it with cyanoacrylate fuming, which is basically like a super glue. I put it in a chamber, and I warm up the chamber, and then I put the item in the chamber, and then the super glue goes on a heating plate inside that chamber. And what that does is it brings up the cyanoacrylate, and it kind of looks like a little white smoky thing inside the chamber, and it's going to adhere to any prints that might be there. And the reason it's humidified is because our prints are about 98% water, so we need to kind of bring back, if there's anything there, humidify it to bring back any of the the components of it. So the super glue will adhere to any ridge detail that might be on that item. And then after that, when that's finished, I will look at it again and document if I see anything. And then in this case, I processed it with something called Ardrox, which is a liquid solution that I spray on it. And it basically, it will stick to the cyanoacrylate, and it will fluoresce any prints if they're there.
All right. And when you do this process, are you altering the actual item?
No.
Okay. If you recall, what was the item that you were asked to examine?
A black gas cap, like from a vehicle.
And did you have an opportunity to do that?
Yes, I did do that.
And when did you do that? Do you recall?
It was January of 2017.
And the process you just described, did you do that process?
Yeah, that's the exact process I did on that item.
All right. And what, if any, results did you have?
I did not find any latent prints.
So let's just talk about that very briefly. You said you found no latent prints. Are there times where you find partial prints?
Yes, if I did find any type of ridge detail, I would have documented that.
All right. So this gas cap, you found nothing.
Correct.
In your profession, would that be something that you would thought to be unusual?
With that type of item, no.
And why is that?
First of all, it's textured. So usually it's difficult to process items like that for prints. But there's also a lot of other environmental things that have to be considered. Like, I have no idea what it went through before I received it. So I don't know if it was outside. I don't know, it depends on the packaging. But with that type of item and the shape of it, and you think you're only holding it, and the pressure you usually have to enforce on it to get it to come open, usually it's a lot of pressure. So usually it won't leave a really good print if it leaves one at all.
As far as the item and the things you just told, that you would have to use pressure to turn that item in as it would be used on a car, was it reasonable to attempt to get fingerprints?
I will process anything they ask to be processed for latent prints. I will always try.
Okay. And of course, you don't know if who touched it, if anybody, was wearing gloves or not.
Correct.
And you wouldn't know if it had been wiped down or not.
No, I wouldn't know any of that.
And even if there were prints on there, if somebody had wiped it down, what result would you have?
It just depends.
Okay.
If there were prints on there and they wiped it down, they could possibly wipe it off. It just depends on if how dirty the person's hands were, if the person is a natural secretor, or if they just did a crappy job wiping it down.
All right. And you could have a smeared print.
Yes.
Right? Okay. You mentioned the word secretor, and tell us what that means.
Just somebody who sweats a lot.
All right. And is that more likely to find a fingerprint of somebody who secretes versus who doesn't secrete?
It's more likely.
Okay. And are there, people that, could touch an item and they don't secrete very much, but even though they touch it, they don't leave a print?
Correct.
All right. So the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, correct?
Correct.
So let me talk about DNA. Do you collect for DNA?
I will swab an item for DNA if it is requested.
And you don't do that testing either, is that fair?
Correct, I don't test it.
You would do the same thing, you would swab an item and then send it off to maybe BCI for them to do an analysis.
Right.
In this case, you were not asked to do DNA testing, is that
No.
correct? So you did the fingerprint testing and you had a result that there was no fingerprints.
Yes.
Subsequent to that, then did you have a request about DNA testing?
Yes, we did.
All right. And would you have done the testing?
If I had known at the time when the original item was submitted that they would like DNA and latent prints at the same time, that would have changed my processing method for latents, and I could have done that. But at the time when it was submitted to us, it was just a latent print request, so I processed it as a latent print request. And then later, after the item has already had the dye stain on it, the R-Drox, it's already gone through that process, the DNA request came in, and we could not, it would have altered any DNA that would have been on the item.
All right. Do you know if that item was still in existence at the time, or had it been destroyed?
Reading through the conversations in the case in our system, I believe we had a signed destroyed evidence release form, so it was not in our possession.
All right. So basically, after you're done with your testing, you then release it back to the agency for destruction, or some other person for destruction?
So when we generate a report, like the latent print report, they would say, no latent prints were found. We send with them, with that report in the snail mail, that you can have your evidence sent back, you can come pick your evidence up, or you can have your evidence destroyed. So we have a form where somebody had marked destroy evidence, and it's signed and it's scanned in, and so therefore we destroyed it on site.
All right. And that would have been between the time that you did your examination for latent prints and the time for the request for the DNA testing?
Yes.
Since there was no latent prints found by you, I'll still ask you, the opinion that you gave us here today that there was no latent prints on that item at all, is that within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Oh. I apologize. See, I'm like Mr. Gorman, I forget things too. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm going to show you what I marked as states, what's been marked as states 106. Do you recognize that?
Yeah, this is the report that I generated.
All right. And that's not the actual report, that's a copy?
Oh, yeah.
And it's an accurate copy?
Yes, it is.
All right. And it indicates on here, I think the words, no latent prints of value were found on exhibit number 1.
Correct.
All right. Now, when you say no latent prints of value, you found no prints.
No prints, correct.
And the date of that report was January 30th, 2017.
Yes.
Nothing further, Judge.
Mr. Riley?
Good afternoon, Ms. Jordan. Just a couple questions for you. Again, you act in your role as a forensic examiner based on what the other agencies ask you to do, correct?
Yes.
Right. So the fire department submits an item to you and you do only what they ask you to do, correct?
I do only what I'm trained to do.
Okay. And you're trained to identify and lift prints, correct?
Yes.
And you don't actually do the comparisons, correct?
Correct.
Are you trained at all in how to make those comparisons?
Yes, I have taken those classes through the OPATA.
Right. So you know when you pull a latent print and you send it off to somebody for a comparison, they compare the unknown, the latent print, with the known, a known sample, correct?
Yes.
And then they see if those match, correct? And the same is true for DNA. You swab for the DNA, correct?
Correct.
And you send that off to the lab to determine what the DNA pattern is, if you will, correct?
Yes, the DNA analyst will.
And then they compare that with a known sample, correct?
Yes, if they have it.
And that all, I guess the direction on that comes from the investigating agency, correct?
Yes.
And the only thing that you were asked to do in terms of fingerprints or DNA regarding the state of Ohio versus Stanley Ford is what we just talked about just now, correct?
Just the latent prints.
Right. And nobody asked you, well, they asked you to do DNA, but it was too late, correct? When we talk about the fingerprints, I think you talked about a natural secretor, and Mr. LaPrenzi asked you a little bit about gloves or wiping down. Am I correct in my understanding? You take that aside, leave aside gloves, leave aside wiping down. In your expert opinion, based on the object you were testing, it was very unlikely that you were going to find a print anyway, correct?
Yeah, that's a tough surface.
Thank you.
Just very briefly. Very briefly.
Take your mask.
As an expert, you know that based on the surface that you found on that gas cap, correct?
The surface of the gas cap and experience in processing for latent prints.
And you're an expert in that.
Yes.
So a detective may not have that same knowledge.
They may not, but it never hurts to try.
No, I mean, in other words, they wouldn't automatically assume, oh, this is a surface that is not going to produce a latent print.
They may not.
Okay. And so they send it to you to make that determination.
Yes.
All right. Is it fair that the DNA that would be found comes from latent prints?
Yeah, I mean, it can.
Thank you. I'm not the further.
DNA doesn't come exclusively from prints, correct?
Not exclusively.
It comes from bodily substances, correct?
Yep, skin cells.
Skin cells, sweat, correct?
Correct.
Those might be the same components that make up a latent print, but they're not exclusive, correct? All right, thank you.
All right, Mr. Jordan, thank you very much. You may step down.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take our lunch break. I'll remind you, I'll give you the full one this time, of the admonition I've previously given you regarding your conduct in this matter. It's important that you be fair and attentive. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. This includes family, friends, and the media. You must not post or read anything about this case, including on your cell phone. Any discussion, if discovered, could lead to a mistrial, which would severely compromise the party's right to a fair trial. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. Do not form or express an opinion on the case until it's finally been submitted to you. It is, by my calculations, 12:20. We'll take an hour break. You'll be back in the jury room, and we'll begin at 1:20, and then leave your notepads upside down on your seats. Thank you.
All right, please. Members of the jury, please remain in the jury room for just a few moments, a few minutes. Thank you.